My name is John Benet Ramsey, and I'm 5.5.
And that's backwards.
How do you prove you're not guilty?
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. This episode is essentially a supplemental to the Khan's Order episode 17. In this episode we will be dealing exclusively with the basement window evidence, specifically dealing with the leaf debris that is mentioned in the Khan's Order. Now, some of you familiar with the Matrix may be familiar with the aphorism, nobody can be told what the Matrix is, you've got to see it for yourself. Well, the same applies to the matrix of leaves and the debris that is described in the Khan's Order. And so that is exactly what we're going to do in this episode. I'm going to take you through a series of slides, and then we're going to juxtapose those to the statements, the incredible statements, the incredibly inaccurate statements that are in the Khan's Order. And obviously what this is doing is dealing with the specifics of Lou Smith's intruder theory. Probably the most vital part of the intruder theory is where Lou Smith contends that the intruder got in. And of course he photographed and took video of himself entering through the grate, through the window and down into the basement, and then of course took photos of that. One thing that he didn't simulate were the conditions. I think he did the simulation probably in March. One thing he didn't simulate were the snowy conditions at the time of the incident. So specifically what I want to highlight from the Khan's Order is her saying, quote, "There is likewise undisputed evidence of a disturbance in this window well area, specifically the leaves and white styrofoam packing peanuts that had pooled in the window well and had appeared to have been cleared from or brushed to either side of the center window sill in the well." And so if you look carefully at the title image, you can clearly see an area where the debris has been cleared away by an intruder right in front of the open window. Areas of dust have clearly been swept to the side by hands and feet on their way through. And notice the styrofoam popcorn accumulating to the right of the image. And then look at the bottom slide, and what do you see? Do you see the same thing? Before we get to the rest of this episode, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started. So this really is about just spotting the difference. It is about looking at one image and then looking at another image. And of course, which image do you think is the crime scene photo, and which photo do you think is where Lou Smith is demonstrating the intruder theory? Now, of course, how can you use the intruder theory photos as your crime scene photos? They're not the same. So can you see in this image it says crime scene photo, and there's quite a lot of dirt and debris in front of the window. To the right of the center window is the styrofoam debris. It also appears a window shade might be in place in front of the window to the right. Now look at the basement window on the left. Window debris across the actual windowsill, and opposite it, along with a detached window shade, there's also a tied piece of string, possibly nylon, possibly plastic or wire, with a loop on one end, slightly submerged by debris. Now let's refer to the central window. This is the window that was actually broken. And once again, take note, the image is identified as crime scene photo. Notice the dirt on the actual windowsill. So it's almost in that shaded area, right? As well as the shallow heaps of dirt and debris on the cement area outside of it. So what I want you to take note of now, obviously, I know how the eye works. What you're looking for are cleared areas, and it does look as though there are small areas there that are lighter in color than the others. But what I want you to do instead is almost invert that and focus instead on the amount of other debris that's there. I want you to look at the little pieces of It looks like stones, possibly leaf fragments, all around that area. Look to the left, look to the middle, and look slightly to the right. And then what I want you to bear in mind is you don't actually have a situation here where that cement area has actually been cleared, or that the windowsill has been cleared for that matter. And this is a crime scene photo that was taken right at the time of the incident. So where is the stepping into this particular area? Where is the moving of the moving and the removal of this debris as the intruder entered or exited the scene? So what we want to do now is contrast that with the image from Lou Smith's demonstration. Now, this is a very useful image because if an intruder did enter and exit through the basement, we'd expect a clearing in the dust and debris exactly as it appears above. We'd expect it to be the area in front of the central window to look exactly like this. So it's useful to have this as a reference image. Likely the intruder's hands and shoes were damp from walking over snow to get to and open the grate. He stood on the debris of dust and leaves, and these transferred into the crime scene. That's what we'd expect. Except they didn't. Instead of dust being cleared when climbing in or out, the dust is in place, relatively undisturbed in the crime scene photos. Now, in the screen grab of the spider's web, you get a view from the other side, almost eye level, with the debris. And can you notice how it's sort of piled up there? And it's really not at all the way it's described in the Khan's order as cleared away. Something else that I don't know if it even bears mentioning, but there are no spider webs in the image from Lou Smith's demonstration. And of course there are not only spider webs, but there are leaves in the grate as well. In this poor quality screen grab of video footage shot at night, you can see twigs and leaf debris possibly sitting on freshly fallen, semi-melted snow mush. Now, what you need to bear in mind when you look at this image is we've seen the photos, and you clearly see kind of a powdery substance, looks like dirt, and this looks different. This looks almost like a kind of a cement, or a kind of I don't even want to say cement. It kind of looks like congealed mud or tea, sort of a tea sort of color. And what I would surmise is going on here is this is small amounts of snow that has fallen through the grate onto the area below. Perhaps some of it is melted to some extent, and then it has refrozen and created this sort of congealed, frozen substrate, which has trapped essentially pieces of leaf and dirt in it. Now, you could make that argument. You could say that, well, the reason the intruder didn't leave prints or wasn't able to move the debris away, well, it was frozen in place. That doesn't make complete sense, because if you want to make that argument, then you'd come back to the footprints in the snow problem. The other thing is, you would still expect a certain amount of debris to transfer. Bear in mind that snow is not solid, and that also you can have pieces of leaf embedded in snow that gets caught up in the grooves of shoes, and that would then easily deposit inside the basement. Now, I think the first and most obvious thing to deal with here is you have the story that John broke the window in the summer, and Patsy said that she asked the housekeeper to clean it up. And bear in mind, Patsy also identified the housekeeper as a possible suspect right in the beginning. She's also identified in the book right in the beginning. So the housekeeper is identified as a suspect, and now the question is, what does the housekeeper say about this broken window? Now, you can clearly see a scenario where if the housekeeper denies that the window is broken, oh, the housekeeper must be guilty in some way. And bear in mind, the housekeeper had to give handwriting samples. She was questioned very early on. But this was what the housekeeper, Linda Hoffman-Pugh, said about the story about the broken window. She said, another thing that made me think Patsy had staged the whole crime scene was the broken window in the basement. I used to clean their house 3 times a week. If something was broken, Patsy had me clean it up. On the morning of the murder, police found a broken window in the basement, just a few feet from the room where John Bonet's body was found. John Ramsey told the police that he had broken the window to get into the house months before, when he was accidentally locked out. But I think that is a lie. So I want to stop there and just highlight that part, is that she disputes that. She's saying that John didn't break the window, or that she doesn't believe that that is what happened. Unfortunately, in this article, she doesn't clarify that as far as she was concerned, the window was never broken. All she says is she doesn't believe that version that John gave, that he'd broken the window months earlier. And I think part of the reason she says that is based on her statement here. She apparently never cleaned up broken glass. And unfortunately, she's not as clear as one would like her to be on this aspect. But let's go through it. She says, if there had been broken glass in the basement, Patsy would have told me to clean it up. Now, reading between the lines, she's saying, if there'd been broken glass in the basement, Patsy would have told me to clean it up. The fact that she says, if there had been broken glass, she is implying that there wasn't broken glass. She would have cleaned up broken glass if there was broken glass. Since there wasn't broken glass, Patsy didn't tell her to clean anything up. Certainly not when in this long period between the summer and the winter. Something I've also observed a couple of times is if you'd had a window broken in that area, you would have had icy cold air coming into the playroom, and it would have been unpleasant. Bear in mind that cold air sinks. And you would have had also people entering the basement on other occasions as winter approached, aware of this cold air coming into the room, right? It also wouldn't have been an ideal spot to commit a crime from the perspective of comfort, I guess, if you want to put it that way. But to get back to Linda Hoffman-Pugh, she says, John claimed he was locked out on that day when he supposedly broke the window. And her using those words, when he supposedly broke the window, she obviously disputes that version of events. I think she disputes when it happened, and I think she disputes the circumstances under which her former employer said that it happened. And then she further provides some reinforcement, saying he never used the key to come in the front or side door of the house anyway, right? He always opened the garage door from his car with his remote and came in through the garage entrance. Now, only the housekeeper would really know that. And so it makes sense. He came home from, I think, the trip in his story. Why wouldn't he have the key with him? Why wouldn't he have the garage remote with him? Then he says, I think Patsy broke that window herself. So this is what she believes, that Patsy broke that window herself to make the police think that there had been an intruder. And John concocted the story about breaking the window. Now, I don't know whether that part is true, that Patsy broke the window herself, but I think what she's saying is that she believes that the window was broken that night. And I think that is very interesting. Somebody on YouTube said, why on earth, and it's a very good point, why on earth would you break the window to make it look like an intruder got in there or could have got in there, and then not tell the detectives when they arrive and the police when they arrive, and they ask, were there any doors open or windows open? Why wouldn't John or Patsy put up their hands and say, yes, there's a broken window in the basement? Why wouldn't they do that? And I think the reason they did that, and it's quite clever if it's true, is to open the window, so to speak, to the possibility of an inside job. So in other words, if that window had been broken for months on end and had never been fixed, then you can have a scenario where someone who knew the house, who had access to the house, would know that they had this option, right? In other words, someone who was close to the Ramseys, like a housekeeper, would know that this would be an optional way to get in. And obviously they would argue about when this window would be broken, which would, in a way, increase suspicion on the housekeeper. Does that make sense? Now, something else that I think is worth talking about, in the Khan's order, she refers to, there is likewise undisputed evidence of a disturbance in this window well area, specifically the leaves and white styrofoam packing peanuts that had pooled in the window well appear to have been cleared from or brushed to either side. Can we agree that that is not the case? And then the part that I wanted to read deals with the debris. It says, further, the Boulder police conducted experiments that showed a person could enter the basement playroom. I don't know if I agree with that it's the Boulder police conducting experiments or Lou Smith. Certainly Lou Smith's not the Boulder police. Anyway, it says, moreover, leaves and debris consistent with the leaves and debris found in the window well were found on the floor under the broken window, suggesting that someone had actually entered the basement through this window. I don't agree with that. I don't agree that there was leaves and debris found under the window well. And if you look at crime scene photos, do you see any? Right, and bear in mind, by this stage, the window had been open for some time, but do you see any leaves or debris lying on the ground? And the thing is, if there had been leaves or debris, it would most certainly have been mentioned, because that would be excellent evidence of an intruder. There is a crime scene photo, kind of a zoomed in photo of the suitcase, and it looks like there are small things at the bottom there, but that certainly doesn't look like the amount of debris that you'd imagine an intruder would make if he was coming from the outside in, right? You would imagine he would kick quite a lot of dirt down there, and that he would also, there would be lots of things lying there. There would be not just leaf fragments, but pieces of, popcorn, styrofoam popcorn. There would be spiderweb strands and so on. So I really think in something like this, seeing is believing. You've got to look at these crime scene photos, and it just beggars belief that the Khan's order came up with some of the statements that they came up with. I fault the prosecution more for not raising a rigorous case and a rigorous defense of their case. And it just seems as though Judge Carnes took what she was given at face value, right? And then this is the result, right? So what you can do if you're interested in the topic, there's a blog post from Shakedown, Who Broke the Basement Window. I'll put a link to that in the description. It's something that we've covered in quite a lot of detail, but I'm going to do a further follow-up episode also dealing with some of the information from episode 17, dealing with John Fernie's statement about being able to see the ransom note through the window. Apparently he was reading it upside down, and we're going to deal with that in the next episode. Once again, interestingly, it's very interesting what the housekeeper says about her habits regarding what John Fernie says as well, and how that's related to the ransom note. And so we'll deal with that in the next episode, dealing with John Fernie's statement on the ransom note. Thank you for listening. I hope you have a safe and enjoyable Good Friday and Easter weekend this weekend, and I'll see you guys next time.